keep the time, please?
Yes, sir, I'll do it. We can start. Yeah.
Okay. ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्दे क्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम् Namo Rama. We will commence the Friday Atma Vichara by reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject of Atma Vichara, and the compilation is done by our founder President Sri A.R. Natarajanji, and we have been looking at Bhagavan's Upadesham between 1936 to 1950, and we have been pondering over a series of discussion between, as Akka said, between Paul Brunton and Bhagavan. And after reading the Upadesham, we will meditate on Bhagavan's answer by his grace, and then have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session, following which Akka would be talking about Atma Vicharam from Ramana Geetam, and then we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. I'll just, for us to come up to what we have been meditating on, what Paul Brunton has been asking Bhagavan, I will read from question 6, and today we are looking at the 9th question and answer. Devotee, what exactly is this self of which you speak? If what you say is true, then there must be another self in man. Maharshi, can a man be possessed of two identities, two selves? To understand this matter, it is first necessary for a man to analyze himself. Because it has long been his habit to think as others think, he has never faced his I in the true manner. He does not have a correct picture of himself. He has too long identified himself with the body and the mind. Therefore, I tell you to pursue this inquiry, who am I? You ask me to describe this true self to you. What can be said? It is that out of which the same of the personal I arises and into which it would have to disappear. Then the devotee says, disappear? How can one lose the feeling of one's personality? Bhagavan says, the first and the foremost of all thoughts, the primeval thought in the mind of every man is the I, is the thought I. It is only after the birth of this thought that any other thoughts can arise at all. It is only after the first personal pronoun I has arisen in the mind that the personal pronoun you can make its appearance. If you could mentally follow the I thread until it leads you back to its source, you would discover that just as it is the first thought to appear, so is it the last to disappear. This is a matter which can be experienced. The devotee asks, you mean that it is perfectly possible to conduct such a mental investigation into oneself? Bhagavan says, assuredly, it is possible to go to inwards until the last thought I gradually vanishes. The devotee asks, what is left? Will a man then become quite unconscious, or will he become an idiot? Bhagavan says, not so. On the contrary, he will attain that consciousness which is immortal, and he will become truly wise when he has awakened to his true self, which is the real nature of man. I repeat the last part of the question answer. What is left? Will a man then become quite unconscious, or will he become an idiot? Bhagavan says, not so. On the contrary, he will attain that consciousness which is immortal, and he will become truly wise when he has awakened to his true self, which is the real nature of man. Bhagavan here, in this series of question and answer, is saying how, without knowing what we really are, and by taking what others see or what others do as the correct way without the act of inquiring who am I, when we simply follow how we get into the misery and this dichotomy, are there two selves, the one in the waking, the one on the self, and the difference that there is I and self, and all of that will come upon. And therefore, Bhagavan asks us to investigate about the I and get back to the source from which this I has arisen, and finally has to merge back. Then the question comes, okay, if this I thought is the first thought that has arisen and is responsible for all these phenomena that we are seeing, what happens when that disappears? Will we become an unconscious person, or will we become something like an idiot? Is the question. Bhagavan very clearly says that in fact we become contrary to the belief that we think. When we have been so habituated to thoughts that we think that moment we don't think, we may appear to be like an idiot in front of many people. We may become like an unconscious person. And Bhagavan is saying here, on the contrary, that we will attain the Purna consciousness, the pure consciousness, and the one which is immortal. And we not only become that, Bhagavan very beautifully says, we become truly wise, which is the most important part of the answer as well, that we become wise. And when this true self, the real nature of man, is awakened. I was listening to one of the Upadeshams given by the Shankaracharyas, and he was beautifully narrating. If a person is a good writer, and we ask him to write, but if we don't give him a pen, how would he write it? If we don't give him a paper on a pen, how would he write it? It's the same way. So the pure self, which is the most beautiful one, which can manage everything so wisely, if we don't know that, and if we don't uh, if that is to that wise self that which is within, the the pen that it uses to write is the Maya, which is the three, which is consisting of three gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now, it is because of these three gunas, the antakaranas are born, and in the antakarana, then we have the first primordial thought, as Bhagavan says, as the I, the aham vritti. It is the thought, the I thought. And then from that, we, because of the gunas, we may have the mind, to be our real nature. And therefore, in fact, we are not at all wise here. What we are is, we are actually we are holding on to an limited entity as our nature, and we are going on we are going through ups and downs because of the nature of these three gunas. The rajas brings about desire towards objects, and we run behind them, and we may get some objects, and because everything in the outside world is transitory in nature, everything that we acquire is not going to be there with us forever, and therefore surely we undergo the pain of the loss as well. And then we have the tamas, the laziness, and sort of become not quite interested in the real nature, but become to take this body and mind as real. So the trigunas make us constantly go outwards, but only when we really inquire. The reason why we need to inquire is because the I thought, as we saw, the foremost of all the thought, it has to transcend this triguna. For it to transcend this triguna, it has to do this, the part of the surrender, the activity of surrender. It has to surrender to that higher consciousness, which is the true self. And therefore, Bhagavan has given us this Atma Vichara, through which we can, even this knowledge that I know about me being an individual identity, that I am consisting of these three gunas, and all of this is driven by these three gunas, all of that is still within that antakarana only. The ego is also within the antakarana only. And all of this is within that Maya. And therefore it is, though the Maya in its purest form is Sattva Guna, pure Sattva itself, but because of these mixture of the gunas and the, the sense of doership, the sense of knowership, this ego entity possesses, we are still in this Maya only. And Bhagavan says that this Maya cannot be transcended by any amount of knowing or doing. Only when we surrender to the true self, then alone we can transcend this entire phenomena or this entire Maya. And to surrender, we have to recognize that we are the individual entity, and that is only a mixture of the pure consciousness associated with this all anatma vastu, all these imaginary vastus, which is not real. And therefore, when we recognize and we surrender, when the ego itself, the I itself surrenders to the pure self, the pure consciousness within, then then the I rises within, the pure I rises within and takes control of this entire phenomena. That's what Bhagavan says. And that is the true surrender that Bhagavan asks us to do. And therefore, this I has to inquire what it really is, or it has to merge back in the true self from which it has imaginarily, to which this imaginary I entity has arisen. And therefore, Atma Vichara is the best course. It is making us to do that one step which is necessary, that where the imaginary ego entity inquires about its reality and merges in the reality, and therefore transcends all the gunas, and it also gets absorbed in the reality and letting the reality alone shine. Therefore, this is the most straight path into the self. This, when we recognize, and then we recognize that that self is verily immortal, that consciousness is verily immortal, and it is free of all this, the trigunas, and therefore it is the most wisest one. It is not the doer or the knower, unlike the ego entity. In that pure self, or in that pure consciousness, the very presence of that consciousness makes everything happen naturally. Bhagavan says that to Yogi Ram Surat Kumar, it is because of the fear of the self that the wind blows. And that is exactly what happens. Just in the presence of the sun, how every event in the earth happens automatically. Likewise, when the pure self shines, then everything happens automatically. And therefore, that is the best way for things to happen. Instead of this ego entity, which is an imaginary limited entity which binds itself or which imagines itself to this, to be this name and form, and believes itself to be the knower and doer, instead of it actually going through the ups and downs, if it surrenders itself to that higher consciousness, which is its real nature, that higher consciousness, which is free of all the desire, which is free of all the knowing, which is all free of all the doing, but in whose presence everything happens naturally, that shines forth. And to make that happen, Bhagavan has given us this most direct path of Atma Vichara, wherein he asks this ego entity, the knower, the doer, to inquire who it itself is. And when it really inquires and recognizes that higher consciousness is what is the real entity that is there, and this ego entity which it imagines to be is only a thought, only an imagination. And by holding on to this imagination, it is going through this knowing and doing and understanding the ups and downs. And when it truly surrenders itself to that higher consciousness and lets that higher consciousness do as it pleases, as Bhagavan says, Unnishtam, Ennishtam. When that happens, then Bhagavan says that the immortal one, the wise one, takes over everything there. So, for that to happen, for every thought wherein this ego entity rises and tends to know, tends to do with every thought, Bhagavan says, inquire to whom is this thought. Recognize it is to this ego entity, the limited entity I. Inquire who am I and try to find the source of the I. And when we find the source of the I, the ego, along with all these gunas, the desires, the thoughts, everything is absorbed in that one entity, the real consciousness. And by repeatedly diving into that, Bhagavan assures that the self rises and shines automatically with the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which we have come to this most direct path. Let us sit for meditation for the next 20 minutes. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Thank you all. Over to Sarada Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we are dwelling on the path of self-inquiry and have also practiced self-inquiry. And again, continue to meditate on the path of self-inquiry as revealed by Bhagavan to Ganapati Muni and other devotees in the years 1913 to 1917 at Virupaksha cave and Skandashramam, which has been recorded by Ganapati Muni as the Ramana Gita. And we are meditating on the verse in chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the paramount duty, the Mukhya Kartavya Nirupanam. And Bhagavan has categorically said that if we want the highest good, if our aim is nothing short of the highest, then the only duty that is cast upon us is to abide in the self. Swasya swarupam vigneyam pradhanam mahat icchata. Because it is the summum bonum of all actions and their fruits. All the fruits are included in self-knowledge. All the actions are included in self-knowledge. There is nothing further to be done or achieved. Which is why in Upadesha Saram, Bhagavan asks, Krityamasti kim swasthitim yataha. If one is abiding in one's true state, what else remains to be done? Because everything would have been done. All that needs to be done would have been done. Therefore, Bhagavan points out here in Ramana Gita, Sarvesham phalanam uta karmanam. It is all the fruits, it is all the actions, it is the purpose of all the actions. What? Swasya swarupam vigneyam. Or abiding as the self, pratishtha yatra, abiding in the self, is equivalent to everything that needs to be done. It includes all goals, it includes all knowing. Then Daivarata asks, all right, if this is the most important goal to be attained, what is the practice? Sadhanam kim samasataha siddhyet kenaiva yatnena pratyak drishtir mahiyasi. Tell me, what is the practice? What is the sadhana in order to be established in the self? And Bhagavan said, विषयेभ्यः परावृत्य वृत्ति सर्वः प्रयत्नतः विवर्ष्ये केवलं तिष्ठेदचले निरुपाधिके स्वस्य स्वरूपविज्ञाने साधनं तत्समासतः सिद्ध्येत्तेनैव यत्नेन प्रत्यग्दृष्टिर्महीयसी. One must turn away from all objects and fix the attention on the self. Vimarshe kevalam tishtedachale nirupadhike. On the self which is not having any attribute whatsoever. On that self which is our true nature, we need to fix our attention, says Bhagavan. And this is the sadhana. So, what happens? How does it link with self inquiry? What do we do in self inquiry? We do precisely this only. We turn attention away from the Vishaya or the object or the objective knowledge. That which is known to be an object may be said to be Vishaya. That which is not I. So, Bhagavan is asking us to turn attention away from the not I or anything which is an object. We say in the English sentence, the subject, there is a subject and there is an object. The subject, say, I am seeing the sun. Then the sun is the object that is seen. I am the subject who is seeing. And the process of seeing is connecting me with that object. So there is a subject, object, and predicate. Or there is the noun, and there is the verb which connects us with the object noun. There is a subject noun. So there is something which I do, I experience. I am the subject. What does Bhagavan ask us to do in self-inquiry? He asks us to turn the attention back to the subject or on the subject I. Vishayebhyah paravritya vritti sarva prayatnatah, by effort, turn away from all the thoughts which are objects. Every thought is an object. We have to turn attention away from the object onto the subject. So, how are objects experienced by us? Bhagavan makes that simple. Now, when we see in this world, we experience objects through 5 senses. We see things, we hear things, we taste things, we smell things, we touch things. This is the physical experiences which we have. And in Saddarshanam, Ulladu Narpadu, which Muni has translated as Saddarshanam, Bhagavan has said that he says that all the objects are dependent on the 5 sense organs. And these 5 sense organs are contained in the mind. The world is in the form of 5 organs, 5 sense organs. The world is something which is perceived by 5 sense organs. But where are these sense organs? They are only in the mind. Therefore, Bhagavan says, Manomayam tad bhuvanam vadamaha. Therefore, it is said that in the mind. Because every sense experience happens for us. Where does it happen for us? It happens only in the mind. Although I may be seeing with my physical eyes, I may be listening with my physical ears, where am I actually seeing or listening or tasting or touching? It is only in my mind. Because even though my eyes are open, even though they register an object, if I am not paying attention to it, if my attention is elsewhere, what happens to that object? Is it seen by me? It is not at all seen by me. The object is totally dependent for its perception on the subject. Anything for that matter. Every object has to be known to me. It has to be experienced by me. It is only when I say I see that the seeing happens for me. There may be many objects. There are millions of objects in this world. Even when we have our eyes open, in the arena of our vision, there may be hundreds of objects, but we do not see all of them. We register some and we do not register some. So those which we register, meaning to say, those to which we pay, those objects experience. And where is all this experienced? It is only in our mind. How is it experienced? It is experienced as thought. As thought. Every perception of ours is a thought for us. So where is the world? Manomayam tadbhavanam vadamaha, says Bhagavan. The world is only in the mind. The world is not outside of the mind. And each one of us carries our own world with us. We have an independent world. Each one has an independent world. Actually, we do not even live in the same world as anybody else, because our world is completely unique to us. It is carried by us in our mind, and our mind is completely unique to us. Nobody else shares our mind with us. So, our mind being completely unique, the world which is there only in this mind is also completely unique to us. But we recognize that the world is outside of us. We do not feel that the world and I are one and the same. For me, the world is an object. It is something which I perceive. It is something which I know. When I say I see something, it is very obvious that that which I see is not I myself. I say I see a table, I do not feel that the table is I myself. Whatever I may see. And when I see a movie, I know the movie is not I. So anything which I see is not I. When we are talking about the inquiry of turning the attention away from objects, it means I turn the attention away from everything which I see. See, the word see can be also interpreted or understood as perceive or know. Anything which I know, anything which I perceive, because seeing doesn't necessarily mean seeing. Seeing means listening also. Seeing means tasting also. Seeing means experiencing something or knowing something, perceiving something. Now, what all is perceived is only an object. Anything that is perceived by us, anything that is known to us has to be an object. It is not the subject. Our eyes see a beautiful sight in front of them. They see a beautiful object. Say they see a beautiful picture or statue of Bhagavan. Now, do we feel that what the eyes see are the eyes themselves? Obviously not. That which the eyes see is apart from the eyes. It is seen as an object. That which the ears hear is the object of listening. It is not my ears themselves. Similarly, that which I know as my experience, be it my joy or my sorrow or my anger or whatever the thought, whether I think of being tall or being short or being fat or being thin, whether I think of being healthy, whether I think of being in pain, whether I think of anything in this world, there is this thought which has arisen in my mind and which I am aware of as my thought. my anger, my sorrow, my joy, my memory, my anticipation, my hope. It is mine. That means it is an object for me. It is a possession or an object in my horizon of seeing. In my vision, it is an object. It is not I myself. And it passes away. This perception of the object is never permanent. It passes away. I come to know about one object, then my attention moves to another object, then it moves to a third object. In this manner, the attention is going on moving. So, what is Bhagavan asking us to do? He is asking us to turn attention away from the object. How is one to do it? By turning attention away from thought. Turning attention away from the object means turning attention away from thoughts. Vishayebhyah paravritya vritti sarva. All the thoughts which are only objects. One must turn attention back from all the thoughts which are objects. Where should one fix the attention? Through effort, one should fix the attention on the source or on the self, which is not an object, which alone is not an object. So this is what Bhagavan is describing here, the process of self-inquiry, that as and when an objective awareness arises in us in the form of a thought, as and when a thought arises, one must make the effort to turn it back to its source, turn it back to the self. By becoming first aware, oh, I am caught up in thinking. If I am caught up in thinking, it means my attention has been captured by some object. That's what a thought is. The capturing of my attention by some object is a thought. So the moment I realize that I am thinking, I know, oh, my attention has been captured by this object, and therefore that object has occupied my awareness at this moment. Whatever the object is. If I say I am feeling sad, I can recognize that my attention has been captured by sorrow. And then I have become completely immersed in that object called sorrow. After some time, by my effort or just because of providence, my attention may be captured by some other emotion. The situation may change and sorrow may give place to joy. Pain may give place to relief. Then what happens? Then my attention is on joy. At that point of time, it is captured by the joy. But I do not wonder, in the midst of all these changing, ever-changing experiences, emotions, I do not ask myself, one moment I was happy, next moment I am sad, third moment again I may be happy, fourth moment I may be angry. But these are all passing like a film. All these experiences are passing like a movie, a moving picture. They are just coming one after the other. They are entering, capturing my attention for some time, then going on. Just like I watch a movie on a screen, one scene after another is being played. And I am completely lost in it. But who am I? Who am I? When I am not any of these experiences, who am I who is aware of all these experiences. Again and again, says Bhagavan, continuously one must turn attention back until it rises less and less to grasp objects, until it recognizes the absolute futility of paying attention to objects, because the highest duty is to know the self, not to know any object whatsoever. The highest duty cast upon us is only to know the self. So, if we are convinced that that is the highest duty, if we are convinced that is our highest yearning, that is our most important yearning, why would we be wasting our attention, our energy of attention, turning it on to objects which are all a passing show? Would we not be eagerly wishing to know who is this I who says there are objects, who says there are experiences? And when we turn the attention back to the I, it is in a way turning the attention back to its source. It automatically gets absorbed there. It does not get dissipated. In objects, it gets dissipated, moves fast, because there are millions of objects to which we may pay attention. But when the attention is turned back, there's only one I. There are not millions of eyes there. There is not millions of selves over there. So the attention becomes gathered, it becomes powerful, it turns within, and then it has to be fixed over there. Vimarshe kevalam tishte. One has to fix the attention there. Achale nirupadhike. There are no attributes to that experience. There are no attributes. Health, this beauty, this body is an attribute. It comes and it goes. Health is an attribute. It comes, it goes. Learning is an attribute. It comes, it goes. Name, good name, fame, these are all attributes. Even our love for someone, their love for us, and our love for someone is also an attribute. It changes. It is subject to change. Even when we continue to have love for somebody, the manifestations of it are constantly changing. And it is not there with us, as we have seen in our deep sleep. It is subject to that change, if not to anything else. So everything, our goodness, our virtues, our discrimination, saying this is an object, this is not an object, even that is an attribute. Even that comes and goes. But I, who am not an object. So Bhagavan says, abide in that non-objective experience by the force, by the power of the effort. Prayatnataha. Vimarshe kevale tishthe dachale nirupadhike swasya swarupa vijnane sadhanam tat samasata. Siddhet tena eva yatnena pratyak drishtirmahiyasi. Only by turning to the self can one experience the self or see the self. It is only by turning to the self constantly that one can see the self. So, by Bhagavan's grace, the enquiry takes us inward. Bhagavan says, inward is the path. And then it takes us into the fullness of abidance. At that point, inward, outward, subject, object, Bhagavan says, all these discriminations will disappear. Until that point of time, by that immense grace, let us hold on to the inquiry and strive to abide, abide, abide in the self. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ram.
Namo. Thank you, Akka. अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तम् गुहाहितं तं भ्रमणं गभीरम् चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. Namo Ramana.